The human person holds it out against the infinite. They hold it out against the darkness. Welcome to Ostracon, a podcast that translates fragments into the whole from which they came. So today, we're reading Down at the Docks by Kenneth Koch. Kenneth Koch was born in Cincinnati in 1925, and he died in New York in 2002. He was a member of the New York School of Poetry that proposed an exuberance in writing over a sense of solemnness and formality. And he taught at Columbia for over 40 years. And we're reading his poem, Down at the Docks. It's short enough that we can read it right here. Down at the docks, where everything is sweet and inclines at night to the sound of canoes, I planted a maple tree, and every night beneath it I studied the cosmos, down at the docks. Sweet ladies, listen to me. The dock is made of wood. The maple tree's not made of wood. It is wood. Wood comes from it, as music comes from me, and from this mandolin I've made out of the maple tree. Jealous gentlemen, study how wood comes from the maple. Then devise your love so that it seems to come from where all is it, yet something more. White spring flowers and leafy bough, jealous gentlemen. Arrogant little waves knocking at the dock. It's for you I've made this chanson. For you and that big dark blue. So this is, I think, a wonderful poem that looks deeply into the situation in which we find ourselves here. It's got 4 stanzas, and we could even go, I think, stanza by stanza and look at each of them and build up an understanding of what we're trying to say here. So it begins. Down at the docks, everything inclines to the sound of canoes. What sound does a canoe make? A light sound. A quiet sound that requires attention. So in the early lines, it's saying, listen carefully. Also, for those of you who have spent a lot of time on canoes, they make a sound that is very natural. Although you could distinguish a canoe moving through the water, it moves with a sound not wholly unlike the movement of the water itself. On a lake, maybe it would be easier. With moving water, it would be much harder. And so there's a sense here that there's a made thing, a man-made thing, a created thing, a boat that carries us. So you have also that sense brought in of the vessel that carries. And it's man-made, but it has a certain affinity with nature. And so right off the bat, we're listening for this thing that comes from us, but is yet one. And we have to listen carefully, all right? I go into that depth because it's going to come back again as we move on. What happens here? He plants a maple tree at the dock, and he sits beneath it at night and he studies the cosmos. So, again, you have a representation of this cooperative relationship. The tree is there because he planted it. He planted the maple tree, but he didn't make the tree. He didn't make the seed. He didn't cause it to grow, but he puts it there at the dock. So again, there's a cooperation. Like the raw materials of the canoe aren't created ex nihilo. They come from the world and they make something in communion with the world. He brings the seed and in cooperation with nature plants it and then enjoys what has come. He sits under the tree and he studies the cosmos. So again, you return to that notion of affinity, because there, beneath the product of this little bit of labor and the awe that he has for the tree that is produced, he looks far beyond the tree to the reaches of existence, to the cosmos. There is a directionality to his work, that this affinity and cooperation with nature causes him to look upward and outward to the furthest things that he might find, the furthest things that he could know or become. So it is an upwardly directed relationship. It is generative. Now, the first stanza sets this relationship. As we move to the second stanza, we expand on what it means for the human person. There's this interesting relationship about what is wood and what is made of wood. The dock is made of wood. The maple tree is not made of wood, it is wood. Wood comes from it. So, the tree which he planted but did not make, it is this fundamental thing. It is the wood. Then what do you do with the wood? You make other things that are made of wood but are not wood, are not fundamental. So the dock is made of wood. What else is made of wood? The mandolin. The mandolin I've made out of the maple tree. So he plants the tree. He cooperates with nature. Nature gives him this essential thing, the wood, this irreducible thing. He takes the wood and he makes a mandolin. And the way the poem's written, it seems as though he makes it out of a piece of the tree that he's planted. So there's this circle, cooperation, reception. He makes the mandolin. The mandolin is not wood, but it comes from the wood. It's a second order creation. You have this living thing that is fundamental, and then of it, in a second order, in a derivative way, he turns it into the mandolin. But the mandolin is itself a creation. The mandolin that then will make music is something that could not come from the tree alone. So even in taking the essential and making these second-order derivative things, nonetheless, something new is made, something new that would not come only from the fundamental things were they left alone in nature. It is the cooperation among the two, the person and nature, that then makes these things. And perhaps where you might say, I use the word derivative or second order, maybe inappropriately in describing the mandolin, but maybe you might say there is a higher order in the music that might come from the mandolin. Maybe the ability to achieve art out of the mandolin made from the wood, from the tree, is an upward progression, much like how he plants the tree but sits beneath it to look at the cosmos. And then here is a very important connection. He says the wood comes from the tree, but then he goes on to say, as music comes from me. Because even if the mandolin were to be made out of the wood, somebody has to play it. And if somebody were to play it, they'd have to have something to play. a song. And where do these things come from? From the person. So he plants the tree gives him the wood, of the wood he makes the mandolin, and then the music comes from him. Again, looking up toward the cosmos, reaching the heights of what is knowable, livable, seeable through this communion. Now, he goes in the same direction, but at a deeper level. He goes this way first with the tree and the cosmos, then with the tree and the mandolin. Now he's going to go to human relationship. Jealous gentlemen, study how the wood comes from the maple. So see how these things are interdependent, how one comes from another. Then devise your love so that it seems to come from where all is it, yet something more. So the mandolin is the wood that is the tree. So the love is where all is it. But as the mandolin makes the song that comes from the author, the love is yet something more. It comes out of nature, but surpasses nature. And what is the gentleman jealous of? He doesn't say, so we're left to interpolate. But it seems to me jealous of this generative power. The jealous gentleman needs to study how the mandolin comes from the wood that comes from the maple, so that his love can be something more that comes from a oneness with nature and creation, so that he can achieve the thing for which he desires, the thing that is maybe without this special knowledge inaccessible to him. It's almost as though he's teasing him a little bit on the advice at the end of the third stanza. White spring flowers and leafy bough, jealous gentleman. Like, don't forget what I've told you. So we see in these first three stanzas this interrelationship, this creative relationship, this upwardly directed relationship that comes from the nature of the person and his or her relationship to nature. We see how higher, greater things are achieved. Things that can't be achieved without nature, but with it, and in cooperation and communion with it. And then we map that onto ourselves and to the highest things that we can achieve, love, and below that, art, out of this generative relationship. What does it mean to have this power of creation? In part, it means to be made in the image of God, who creates. We find ourselves surrounded by life and beauty, and we can, from it, make the song that glorifies and uplifts. We can bear fruit. The life of the tree is a gift given to the one who makes in the poem. And we find ourselves in the raw materials of the body from which we can make relationships. We can be selfless. We can love others. We can transform the world around us to something greater, not just the material of the world, but even the meaning of our circumstances. We can be transcendent. We can find and express beauty and truth. We can be good. And why? We have the last short stanza, arrogant little waves knocking at the dock. all these little things that are against the dock that is made of the wood of the tree. He says, it's for you I've made this chanson, or this song, the song on his mandolin. It's for you I've made this song, for you and that big, dark blue. So this great reach to our cosmic selves is held out against the infinite. That's what the human person does. Out of the self, out of these higher orders of creation, out of the beauty that is intrinsic to and brought forward from nature, the human person holds it out against the infinite. They hold it out against the darkness. They hold it out against that thing that you feel when you stand at the edge of an immeasurable body of water at night and feel your smallness. They hold it out, and the song goes out against that impersonal expanse. It goes out against the darkness and marks the identity of the person, marks the upward direction that he or she is on, marks the image of God in which they are made, an image that is destined not to be swallowed up by the darkness. It even goes out against the arrogant little waves that knock against the dock. But they're not the tree, and they haven't made the dock, and they're certainly not the music or the love.